The tractor's wheels were still turning slowly when she threw my tools into the mud and shouted, "Keep that piece of junk. It's the only thing that suits you." But the silence that followed cut deeper than any scream. I couldn't say a word. I just stood there, covered in grease, my hands still warm from the engine I'd been trying to fix all day. Her car disappeared down the road, and I was left with the sputter of a broken tractor and her words echoing like a curse in my head. It felt like someone had carved a hole right through my chest. The house was empty, cabinets wide open, the mattress tossed in a corner, and the silverware she didn't bother to take still gleaming in the sink. Every corner screamed her absence. In the fridge, just a bottle of water and a limp carrot. She didn't even have the courage to look me in the eyes before leaving. Said she was tired of living with a man who dreams big but never makes it. But what she never saw was that I gave everything I had, for this land, for her, for us. Out on the porch, the old tractor sat like it was laughing at me, blown engine, cracked fuel tank, wheels sunken in mud. That was all I had left. My dad used to say that a man who loses everything but still lifts his head is stronger than steel. But kneeling in that mud, I didn't feel like steel. I was just another broken man, hands filthy, heart shattered. I cried in silence, so no one could hear, because men aren't supposed to look weak. But inside, I was falling apart. I was 38 years old, and I had a dream to turn that dry, stubborn land into something alive. I'd spent years planting hope where no one believed in anything, and all I got in return was a crumpled note, and the sound of her tires fading as she drove off with another man. Yeah, she left with someone else, a store manager from town who promised her comfort and pavement. She took the car, our plans, and the last scraps of dignity I had left. That night I slept on the garage floor under the blanket my mom had sewn before she passed. It was all I had. The wind whistled through the holes in the roof like it was mocking me. I held my backpack like a pillow and whispered a prayer. Not for her to come back, but for God to give me one more shot. Because I didn't want to die like that, forgotten in a rusty shed that smelled like failure. The next morning I woke up to the sound of a chicken scratching at the door. I actually laughed for a second. The only living soul that stayed with me was that skinny old hen that used to hang around the garden. I gave her a chunk of stale bread and said, "At least you stuck around." It was ridiculous, a grown man talking to a chicken. But that was all I had, and in a strange way, it was enough to get me up. I went back to the tractor, stared at the engine like it had insulted my pride, grabbed an old wrench and started messing with it, no clue what I was doing. Cut my finger, smeared grease across my face, lost a few bolts. But I didn't stop. Every turn of the wrench was a scream that said I wasn't done yet. If she thought I was useless, I'd bring that damn tractor back to life just to prove her wrong. The sun climbed high, burning the back of my neck. Sweat dripped into my eyes, mixing with tears and dust. My arms shook from the strain, but I kept going. Because inside that busted engine was the last flicker of my pride. And even if no one else believed in me, I had to show myself that I still meant something. When evening came and the sky turned orange, I sat on the ground, hands soaked in oil. The tractor didn't start, but I was still there, breathing, alive. And that was already more than she expected. She thought I'd break, disappear. But I was just getting started. I woke up with my stomach growling and the stench of mildew from the garage stuck to my nose. The hard floor had locked up my back, but I didn't complain. I was still breathing, still had my hands. I got up slowly, every bone protesting, and walked over to the sink. The faucet made more noise than water, and what dripped out barely let me wash my face. But it was all I had. This was home now, an old shed, a skinny chicken, and a dead tractor. Word had gotten around. At the market I heard Noosa, The lady who runs the supply store told people I got dumped because I was just a dreamer with no future. Someone else said they'd seen my wife in town wearing new clothes, smiling like she'd made it in life. And there I was, trading a cold lunch for 2 eggs and pretending it didn't hurt. But it did. Every word felt like thorns through my chest. Still, I kept my head down and went back to the land. I tried selling what little I had left. A few rusty tools, a radio that barely worked, and 2 chickens from the flock. It wasn't even enough to cover the overdue power bill. The bank had already warned me. 1 more month and they'd take what was left of the property. A patch of dry land. Worthless to some, but to me, it was everything. I had poured my sweat, my marriage, my dreams into that soil, and now they wanted to rip even that away from me. I went back to the tractor, spent the whole afternoon pulling it apart, piece by piece. I didn't know anything about engines, but I learned the hard way. Picked up tips from an old mechanic in the village who let me hang around his shop in exchange for cleaning up. People called me crazy, said I was lost. I didn't talk much. I saved my anger and used it as fuel. Every time someone called me a failure, it was like turning the key inside me. My hands turned black with grease, my fingers blistered. Some nights I couldn't even feel my wrists. But I kept going. Every bolt I loosened, every gear I scrubbed. Clean was a quiet vow. I haven't given up. The urge to disappear hit hardest at night, in that hollow house she left behind. But the tractor, that pile of useless metal, was the only thing still tethering me to the world. If I could get it running, maybe I'd come back to life too. One day I tried to start it for the 10th time. Nothing. Just a dull click and the familiar growl of failure. I hurled the keys across the garage with all the rage I'd swallowed for weeks. Sat down in the mud and cried like a lost little boy. Maybe she was right, I thought. Maybe I really wasn't good for anything. Maybe I was just another broken man, left behind and forgotten. But deep down, a voice kept whispering, "Don't quit." And then, in the middle of that hell, a face appeared at the garage door. It was Mr. Valdo, an old man who used to know my father. He brought a sack of potatoes and an offer. "I'll help you fix the tractor if you help me with the harvest." I looked at him like someone who'd just spotted a lifeboat in a shipwreck. I didn't hesitate. I said yes on the spot. It was the first hand anyone had reached out to me since she left, and I needed that more than food. The next day, I hauled bags of potatoes while my back screamed and my arms trembled. Mr. Valdo taught me how to change the battery, clean the wires, and understand the basics of the engine. "This tractor's dead but not buried," he said, and I got it. That machine was me, abandoned, rusted, doubted, but still here, still had a soul. That night, lying in the corner of the garage, surrounded by the scent of dirt and sweat, I made a promise. I'm going to rise, even if my back's bent and my heart's torn. I will. The tractor beside me seemed to hear it. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something inside me begin to stir again. The sun had barely warmed the sky when I laid my hands on the tractor once again. The battery was still weak, the wires patched together with whatever I could find. But something inside me said, "Today's the day." The smell of burnt oil still hung in the air, and dust floated through the beams of light slipping in through the cracks in the roof. My fingers trembled as I turned the key. Silence. Then a click. Another. And suddenly, a deep, rough growl rose from the heart of the machine. It coughed, sputtered, and came to life. I yelled. Not a cry of victory. It was a cry of pure relief, of desperation released, of a man who had almost been buried alive and was finally breathing again. Mr. Valdo came running with a rag over his shoulder and a big smile on his face. "Told you," he said. This beast still has fight in it, just like you, son. I dropped to my knees, laughing and crying all at once. The tractor was alive, and so was something inside me. It wasn't just metal turning, it was my dignity roaring back. With the tractor running, I landed a small job, plowing a forgotten field for a local landowner, $30 for the day. It might not sound like much, but after days of going to bed hungry, it felt like I'd hit the jackpot. I drove the coughing tractor out there. The land was hard, full of rocks, but I gripped the steering wheel like a ship's helm in the middle of a storm. Every meter I turned was a piece of my soul being put back together. On the way back, the engine overheated. I had to stop by the roadside and let it cool down. I sat on the hood, watching the sunset, and for the first time in months, I looked at the horizon without fear. I was still broke, still in debt, still living in a shed full of cracks where the wind laughed at me. But I had taken a step forward, and no one could take that away. With the money, I bought better parts. I went to the junkyard, traded labor for gears, for oil, for a new belt. The tractor still stuttered, but it didn't die anymore. And just like it, I was still stumbling, but I was moving forward. Yeah. Valdo called me for another harvest. Then a neighbor asked me to level a plot of land. Word started to spread. He's the guy whose wife left him, and he stood back up. At the market, people started to look at me differently. Before, I was just the guy who got left behind. Now, I was the one who brought a dead tractor back to life. Respect returned slowly. Nobody clapped for me, but no one spat on the ground when I walked by anymore. That alone meant everything. With what I saved up, I bought an old radio, put it in the shed and heard music for the first time in months. I danced alone. The chicken gave me a weird look, and I didn't care. Speaking of chickens, they multiplied. 3 more showed up out of nowhere, started laying eggs. I traded eggs for flour, for soap, for a little dignity. Every trade was a lesson in humility and survival. Food on the table, hot coffee, tractor working. It might not sound like much, but it was enough to lift a man off the ground. I started fixing up the shed with scrap wood, plugged the leaks, made a bed from pallets and a donated mattress, built a shelf from bricks and planks to store my tools, and I hung a handwritten sign on the door. Here lives someone who didn't give up. Because that was the truth. I might not have much, but I had something no one could take away: willpower. On the last night of that month, I sat outside, the radio playing low, the tractor still muddy, the chickens asleep. I looked up at the starry sky and whispered. She left thinking I was the end, but I became the beginning. The breeze passed gently, and for the first time, I slept in peace. News spread fast through the village. João's tractor is up and running again. It was like a miracle. And in some ways, it was. Within a few weeks, I got 3 job offers. People who once looked at me with pity, or worse, with disgust, now called me a strong man or a fighter. I never knew what to say. I just lowered my head, mumbled thank you, and got back to work. I wasn't looking for praise, I just needed peace. That first Monday of the month, I got called to plow the land for Mrs. Lurd's. Her field was large, and the payment was half in cash, half in food. When I finished, she handed me a basket filled with rice, beans, and eggs. She said, "You deserve so much more, but this is what I can give right now. Thank you for not giving up." I almost cried. Her words were worth more than any bill. That was respect. And after the shame I'd gone through, that was gold. The tractor still coughed now and then, but it held steady. I cleaned its parts every day, changed the oil carefully, learned to listen to every sound from the engine like it spoke its own language. It was like caring for a friend who'd saved my life. Because that's what it became. A partner in war. Every cent I earned, I put back into repairs. No luxuries, Just maintenance, reliability, strength. One day, an old man named Damião, someone I'd never met, showed up at the shed. Said he'd heard about me and needed help clearing a patch of abandoned land. He offered to pay in 3 parts as the job progressed. I didn't hesitate, it was work. And when you've met hunger face to face, you don't turn down a chance. I spent 5 days cutting through that earth, stopping only to drink water and chew on dry bread. Little by little, the face of hunger disappeared from my reflection. I no longer felt ashamed to go to the market. I walked with my head high, beard trimmed, body stronger. The clothes were still the same, but something had changed in my eyes. It wasn't pride, it was resolve, the kind that comes from surviving something you never want to relive. With every patch of soil the tractor turned, another piece of pain was buried. I used part of Mr. Damião's payment to buy a tarp and cover the tractor from the rain. It wasn't just protection, it was respect. That old pile of metal gave me a future, and any man who's ever built something from nothing knows the worth of every bolt. I set up a small greenhouse beside the shed, planted parsley, peppers, and tomatoes, just a little. But it was the beginning of real independence. One cloudy morning, I heard a knock at the door. It was a young guy from the local farming co-op. Someone had recommended me for a bigger job, preparing the soil for a larger property. The pay was solid. Real cash. My heart raced. It was the biggest job yet. I said yes without blinking. The next morning, the tractor rolled out before sunrise, its engine roaring stronger than ever. And inside I was roaring too. Plowing that land was exhausting. But it was also the moment I realized I was coming back. The tractor was no longer a broken wreck, and I was no longer a defeated man. We were both rising together. At the end of the job, the farm owner pulled me aside. "You're not afraid to get your hands dirty, huh?" I just smiled. Because when you've fallen face first in the mud, you stop being afraid of dirt on your hands. That night, as the tractor rested under its tarp, I sat on the shed's doorstep with a plate of rice and eggs and thought, she left thinking she was condemning me, but she set me free. And for the first time, I felt gratitude. Not for the abandonment, but for having survived it. The morning I paid cash for a small plot of land, wild, rocky, still covered in brush, my hands shook more than the first time I started the tractor. It wasn't much, just a strip of soil by a creek. But it was mine. No inheritance, no gift, no one signed the deed for me. It was the sweat on my brow, the grease on my hands, the mud on my boots that paid for that land. And even if it was just a patch of earth, in that moment, it felt like a castle. I spent days clearing the land, worked the hoe until my arms locked up. The chickens, now 5 of them, scratched around me like loyal little guards. I still slept in the shed, but somehow the space felt warmer. I built a small garden using leftover seeds from a friend at the market. It was all improvised. All hard-earned, but things started to grow, and that was all I needed. Proof that I could make something bloom. The tractor, rebuilt with parts from junkyards and some bought on payment plans, became a legend in the region. That's the tractor of the man who got left and became a farmer, they'd say. I laughed on the inside. I wasn't a real farmer, not yet. But the fact that they no longer saw me as just a sad story, that was already a win. People who used to ignore me now called me by name. "Hey João, what's your rate to prep a field?" Music to my ears. As my income grew, I bought my first cell phone. Nothing fancy, just enough to text and call. But to me it was a symbol, a turning point. Not long ago I didn't even have credit. Now the co-op was calling me directly. One of them even said, "João, you've become a reference. No one works like you." I smiled, but inside, I remembered the night I slept on the floor without a blanket, hungry and aching. Slowly, I started doing something no abandoned man ever expects to do again. Plan. I wrote goals in an old notebook: fix the water pump, replace the tarp on the shed, plant more corn, raise more chickens, buy a second tractor even if it took 2 years. Each goal was written in firm handwriting, like a man writing his life story with hands still stained by mud and pain. I set up a small stall at the market, started selling eggs, herbs, and vegetables from the garden. It wasn't much, but it gave me freedom. I didn't have to beg for credit or shrink in line anymore. And when someone asked, "Is this all yours?" I'd answer with a steady voice, "Every bit of it." Because it was. Even the bank called, offering me a loan. I laughed. Where were they when I was sleeping on the floor and eating flour mixed? With water, I made friends with a man named Elias, who sold farm supplies in town. He gave me credit, saw the fight in me, and said, "A man who climbs out of the mud deserves trust." I bought lime and began preparing the soil on my little land. The first corn shoots sprouted a few weeks later. I looked at them like a father, watching his child take a first step. It wasn't just corn, it was proof. I could build something. I was a builder. The tractor began working less outside, more on my own land. I joked that it was retiring slowly, but that wasn't true. It was still my right hand. I trusted no one else like I trusted that machine. The co-op noticed my efforts and invited me for a meeting. They wanted me to become an official member, with benefits, access to rural credit, and voting rights. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just work anymore. This was belonging. That night, I hung a new lantern above the shed's entrance and wrote on the wall with charcoal, "Here lives the Joan she left behind." It wasn't bitterness. It was truth. Because every bolt tightened, every chicken fed, every sprout that broke through the soil whispered the same thing. She left thinking I was the problem. But right here, in this shed on this land, lived the solution. It was on a cloudy Tuesday when a journalist from the local community radio showed up at the farmer's market and pulled me aside. "You're Joan, the man with the tractor, right?" I almost laughed. "Sir" was a new one for me. I nodded shyly. He asked to do a story, said my journey had been inspiring others. I hesitated. I'd never liked the spotlight, but I said yes, because if a man abandoned in the mud can serve as an example, then let me be one. On the day of the recording, I cleaned the tractor like it was a sacred relic, oiled the wheels, made it shine. The crew took photos of me with the chickens beside the corn stalks already past my waist. The story aired on Saturday, and by Sunday, I had 3 new job offers on my phone. It was official. My struggle had made the news, and those who used to doubt me were now watching on local TV. That's Joan, the guy who became a farmer with an old tractor. With the money from the harvests, I bought my first freezer and started storing products to sell in bulk. I made a deal with a city restaurant to supply them with vegetables and eggs. The deliveries started small, but steady. The shed, that had once been a hiding place of shame, was now my operations center. I built shelves with bricks and planks, organized everything like a real business. I wasn't the poor guy anymore. I was an entrepreneur. The tractor was still the same, but now it rested with dignity. I bought a heavy-duty tarp to protect it and stopped using it for heavy work. It was my living history. In its place, I rented a bigger machine with the profits from my deliveries. My name had become a reference among small producers, not because of strength, but because of consistency. And consistency is born from pain that's been survived well. One morning, I was invited to speak at a co-op gathering. I walked into the room with my head held high. Faces that once looked away now looked at me with respect. I told my story, plain and true. I was left behind with a broken tractor and a pile of debt, but I turned that abandonment into my starting line. When I finished, Donna Rosa, one of the leaders, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "Mr. João, you are a giant." I began renovating the shed, replaced the old tiles, put up a new wall, installed a real sink, bought a solid wood bed, paid in 8 installments. Every night I lay down, my body thanked me, and so did my heart, because every man needs a place where he can rest without fear of falling apart. That was my home now, and no one was taking it away again. A carpenter friend made me a sign as a gift, Hope Farm. I nailed it at the entrance with pride. From then on, every client knew exactly where they were. And when someone asked for me, the co-op workers would say, "Talk to Mr. João, he's the one who gets things done." And for someone who was once called dead weight, that was worth more than gold. The chickens were 12 now, each with a name, each with its own little nest. Maybe it was silly, but they were mine. They stayed when everyone else left, and now they helped sustain what I'd built. I started selling dozens of eggs with my own label. Simple, but mine. João's eggs, from the ground life tried to take away. That night, I sat on the makeshift porch and looked out at the city lights in the distance. I remembered the day she left me with nothing but a bag and a heap of rusty metal. I remembered the nights on the hard floor, the dry bread, the looks of pity. And I wondered, is she seeing all this? Does she know the man she lost? But the thought faded quickly, because in that moment, all I wanted was silence, a hot cup of coffee, and one more morning to start again. It was a muggy morning when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered with caution, a soft voice, almost a whisper. "João, it's Maria." For a few seconds, time stopped. The same woman who left me with a dead tractor and a crumpled note was now on the line. I said nothing. She took a breath. "I heard about your farm, that you're doing well." And before I could respond, she added, I'd like to talk." I hung up without saying a word. I spent the rest of the day with my thoughts spinning. Every part of this place reminded me of the struggle. The greenhouse I built with tarp and iron poles. The bed I hammered together with scrap wood. The old tractor now resting beneath a zinc roof. None of this would exist if she hadn't walked away. And now she wanted to talk. After all these years. No phone call, no apology. I felt anger, but also pity. Later that afternoon, another call came. Her brother, Henrique, the same one who used to call me a hopeless hillbilly. His voice now soft. "João, Maria's going through some things. She could use some help." I thought maybe. I didn't let him finish. "Henrique, the world turns. But if you push someone into the ditch, you better pray they don't. Climb back out on top." I hung up. It was clear. They were looking for shelter under the tree I grew. At the market, a woman I knew pulled me aside. "João, I saw your ex. She looked sick, was asking about you. She's thin, worn out." I just nodded. When you grow, you become a lighthouse, and darkness tries to find its way back in. But not here. Not anymore. No one walks back in without stepping over the scars they left. The pain she caused me became the cement that built my foundation. On Sunday, a car stopped at the gate. It was her. She stepped out wearing simple clothes, her face drawn and eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Her hands shook as she held out a bag of bread. "I brought this. I wanted to talk to you." I stood still. The chickens ran off to the side. The tractor stood in the back, clean, wheels shining. Everything around us seemed to say, "This is a different time now." She looked around, eyes brimming. "I was wrong, João, I'm sorry." I wanted to respond. I wanted to yell. I wanted to laugh. But all I said was, "There's nothing to forgive, Maria. You didn't leave me with a tractor. You left me with a chance to find myself." She tried to step closer. I took a step back. "This place isn't yours anymore." The words came out dry, firm, but not with hate, with clarity. She cried, "I have nowhere to go." I took a deep breath. "You made your choice when you turned your back. Now I have a home to care for, land to work, and a story that doesn't have room for you anymore." She sat on the doorstep like someone finally unraveling. I said nothing more, went back to feed the chickens. The tractor let out a low hum at just the right moment, like it knew it would never again be touched by the wrong hands. Hours later, she left. No scene, no drama. Just the pain on her face of someone who realizes too late what she never knew how to value. I stood there, watching the wooden gate close behind her, and I thought, now I'm ready to move on. Because even the past has learned, it's not welcome here anymore. It was at the end of my contract with the co-op when the offer came in. An investor from out of town had seen my story online, that radio piece that had gone viral. He said he was looking for someone to manage a large farm, 60 hectares near the river. "I trust people who build with their hands," he told me. "Your name's been passed around as a symbol of dignity." At first I thought it was a prank, but it was real. They offered me a share of the land as payment, and I said yes. I took the tractor, no longer the old one, but a new red model enclosed cab, air conditioning, digital dashboard, and drove out to see the property. It looked like a painting, clean pastures, a natural spring, eucalyptus, trees casting shade. I cried, because it was everything I once dreamed of, and was told I'd never have. I bought a used pickup truck, silver, strong engine, 4-wheel drive, nothing fancy, but it smelled like victory. And every mile it ran down those country roads matched the pride I carried inside. In time, I built a proper brick house. 3 bedrooms, a porch, polished concrete floors, and wide glass windows. I didn't need much. Just a place to breathe, to sleep without fear of rain, to cook without dodging leaks. The old shed became a storage building. The greenhouse expanded. The name Hope Farm was now painted on a cast iron sign. People could see it from the road, and those who once doubted me now swallowed their words. I hired 2 helpers, local boys, strong and humble. I taught them everything with patience, because I knew what it was like to fall and need a hand. I set up a small office beside the greenhouse. It had a computer, internet, a cabinet full of documents, even a coffee maker. It wasn't about showing off. It was about honoring what I'd been through. Now anyone who enters my farm signs a contract. No more chaos here. The co-op sent a team to document my new crops, corn, squash, cassava, and now a professional egg-laying operation. I bought personalized wooden crates, printed labels with my name, and sold directly to city markets. I partnered with 2 restaurants. The pickup truck rolled out loaded every week, and every delivery was a quiet reminder. She thought she left me with nothing, but she actually left me with everything. Then the bank called. "Mr. João, we have special rural credit programs for you." I gave a small chuckle. Now they called me Mr. João. They offered low interest. I negotiated. I didn't take just anything. Because when you've had to sell eggs to buy soap, you learn to value every cent. I took the loan and bought another tractor, used but powerful, for the heavier work. The first one, the old one, now stood proudly at the farm's entrance, like a monument. Then came the official recognition. The city honored me as Producer of the Year. João Batista, a story of resilience and a model of modern family farming. I received the plaque with steady hands, not for pride, but for every night I went to sleep hungry, for every tear shed in the dark of that shed. for every time she called me dead weight. That evening, the truck sat parked in front of the new house. The tractor gleamed under the tarp. The land was planted, the workers were cleaning the beds, and the smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. I sat on the porch, looked out at the orange sky, and thought, she's going to hear my name from people who matter. And when she finds out what I've become, she'll finally understand the man she walked away from. It was a humid afternoon when I saw the dust rising on the road. The old pickup stopped at the gate, and before she even stepped out, I knew. Maria, the same woman who left me with a broken tractor and a shattered soul. Now her hair was tied back carelessly, her clothes wrinkled, and a battered suitcase in her hand. She walked slowly, like someone stepping onto land that was once hers, but knows she's no longer welcome. I calmly closed the truck door and waited. She looked around the farm like someone watching a dream slip through their fingers. "João, I've got nowhere to go," she said, her voice faint. I said nothing. She tried to smile. "I saw the news story. Your house, your new tractor, everything." She looked at the old shed, once our hiding place from shame, now a supply depot. She looked at the well-fed chickens, the lush cornfield, and fell silent. "I lost everything, João. The man I left with, he cheated on me, stole from me, left me on the street." The tears came, but there was no room for pity here. I crossed my arms and said, voice steady, "You didn't come back home, because this was never your home. You left all of this when it was just mud and grease. And now that it's fertile land and solid brick, you think you can just return?" She lowered her gaze. "I messed up. I was stupid. But you know me. I raised my hand. I knew the woman who left. The one standing here. I don't know her. And she doesn't know me anymore either." She was crying for real, but it wasn't regret. It was desperation. "I'm not asking to come back as your wife, just to stay, help out, work." Her pride had already been crushed, but I couldn't sacrifice my peace out of compassion. I took a deep breath. "You didn't give me a chance when I begged for one. Now it's too late. This place has rules, order, respect, and you burned all that when you turned your back." She dropped to her knees. "João, just give me a corner, any corner. I just want to start over." The words were hard to hear, because I know what it's like to beg with an empty stomach. I know the taste of rock bottom. But what I built here was done with blood, and blood isn't shared with those who spilled it. I don't hate you, Maria, but I don't owe you anything anymore." I pointed to the road. "That's the path you took when you left. You'll have to take it again, but this time away." She stayed there a while until it sank in, then lifted her suitcase with difficulty, looked at me one last time. Her eyes said it all: regret, longing, hunger, loss. I didn't say another word, because a man who once screamed alone in the mud doesn't need speeches. She got in the truck and disappeared in the dust, just like before. But this time, for good. That night I sat on the porch. The new tractor gleamed under the moonlight. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. The chickens slept peacefully, and the greenhouse pulsed with life. I opened the notebook where I write everything down and wrote, "Today I close the door for good. Now I hold the key. Because forgiveness may exist, but there's no room here for anyone who tried to erase me." I woke up to the smell of wet earth and the sound of chickens breaking the morning silence. The sun was still shy on the horizon, but the tractor was already idling by the shed. Not the old one, the new one, red paint shining, sealed cab, digital dashboard. The shed now had a solid roof, painted walls, tools lined neatly on a workbench. The same place where I once cried from hunger and shame, now I breathed in the future. I walked to the greenhouse. The lettuce leaves, the tall corn, the thriving collards filled me with a pride I couldn't explain. It all came from me, from my persistence, from my falls. I picked an egg from the nest and gently placed it into a box with my name engraved, João Batista, Real Produce. The new truck, now black double cab, was waiting for another delivery. It wasn't luxury, it was a symbol of the man once called dead weight, who now feeds dozens of tables. Sales grew so much that I had to hire 2 more helpers. I built a small house next to mine to house them, gave them uniforms, paid them fairly, treated them with dignity. Because I know what it's like to be seen as worthless. They call me boss, but I asked them to call me João, because the name that once meant failure now meant example. The co-op invited me to represent the region. Me, the guy with the broken tractor. I spoke at events, gave interviews on state radio, even received an award plaque. When I stepped on that stage and saw the crowd clapping, I thought of everything. The night I slept on the floor, the dry bread and cold coffee, the suitcase tossed in the mud. And I understood. This wasn't a comeback. It was a dignified beginning. I made a donation to the rural school where I studied as a boy, took eggs, vegetable baskets, and told my story to the students. One little girl asked, "Is it true your wife left you because you were poor?" I looked at her and said, "She didn't leave because I was poor. She left because she didn't know that a real man is measured by what he lifts, not by what he owns." The teacher cried. So did I. One Sunday morning I drove up to the highest part of the farm. Took the old tractor, yes, the one she called junk. It was clean with new tires, engine silent but proud. I parked it under a wide tree and hung a sign on the grill. This is where it all began. It was my monument. Not to the tractor but to the fight, because that hunk of metal like me had been written off and proved them wrong. On the way back I stopped by the market. The vendors waved, the customers smiled, kids pointed at me. "That's João from the farm," I waved back, without pride. Because I know the world turns. Tomorrow I might fall again. But today I'm standing tall, with clean hands, a clean name, and a story no one can steal. That night I sat on the porch, kitchen lights on, the greenhouse glowing, the whole farm at peace. The radio played an old country tune, one of those songs about rising up. And there, with a warm cup of coffee and a quiet heart, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you for leaving, Maria." Because only then did I discover who I really was. And as the imaginary camera slowly pans out, João remains there, sitting in silence, moonlight shining on the tractor behind him, the golden field whispering in the breeze. Here lives the one who never gave up.